So what is that, like 6 pounds, 5.5? I'm gonna make a bowl. You see those bowls with the cut rims, like this one up here towards this corner? Yeah. I have one. I threw one on Tuesday or Wednesday. Tuesday? And it's at home, and I'll bring it tomorrow and I'll finish it because this will be too wet to do what I need to do to it. But I'll throw it for you. I'll show how I throw them. When I was in college and I was first making bowls, and I have a bunch of these, I was making these bowls, and they're basically like tall cylinder bowls. And I couldn't figure out how to get like a wide, low bowl. I just couldn't do it. And I'd come to college with a fair amount of throwing skills. I didn't know much about shape or form, but I knew how to move clay okay. And so my teacher didn't spend that much time. You know, it was like people who couldn't center the clay. So those are people who got more attention. So at one point she comes in to just like sit down with me and watch me make stuff. And she was like, oh, when you make that bowl, you're not pulling it with the inside finger at all. And it was just like, oh, I'm not. And it just changed. I mean, it was probably one of the most dramatic changes. Like just someone said something to me. I was like, oh, I've got to like use that inside finger to move the clay. And then it just completely changed the way I threw bowls, and I was able to do what I wanted to just within that instant of hearing her say that. So I'm going to open this up wide and low, and I'm thinking about how much clay I have and how flat this bottom needs to be so that as I bring this out low and wide, I don't have this bottom that's curved up like this, and then I'm trying to get it all the way out like that. So I want to get it like closer, that bottom closer to where I want it to be in the end, being fairly flat across here, and then turning up at the ends. And if you've ever thrown bowls or big bowls, you're getting ready to start, it's much easier to move the clay vertically than it is horizontally. So this thing will grow better up than it will out. If you try to start thinning the wall, the middle of the wall, try to make that grow and the end can't go anywhere, it's just gonna fall down. So I'll make like a lot of these like really wide, low shapes, but they start off as like a U shape, and then I lay them out afterwards. And when I have a lot of clay to move out of the bottom, I prefer to use my sponge to push a lot of that clay in and up. Oh, ripping some off. So I always start in the middle, come out. If anybody's heard of this, I tell my students like a middle school dance. And that inside hand's the boy, no, your inside hand's the girl. She's got to wait over here. The boy pushes in. And then she like takes a step forward to meet him. She doesn't want to go running across the room, find out he's coming to talk to her friend next to her. So, because if you bring those hands together to meet up, you'll end up with a funky curve at the bottom. So I push in with the outside hand, and I come and meet, and they come up together.
That's how you get the hump inside.
Yeah, and that's the dance part of it. These two hands in like together and moving up the side wall.
I find out once you do it one time, you get it, but sometimes it's slow to grasp that.
Better start turning this lip inward a little bit. I'm gonna have trouble. It doesn't feel like 6 pounds. A little thinner. So then I've got a couple of different ribs I use. I like this Michael shell rib quite a bit for this. Well, you know what, I better start off with something else. There's my other Michael shell rib. Have you guys seen me use this one? It's like a little bit different than that. A little bit different in shape than this. And so when I'm making a bowl, this is much more bowl shape. And this is having this flat with these corners on it. It's great for the outside, but not so great for the inside of a bowl. You have this like strong turn. And when you're trying to go on the inside of a bowl with that strong turn, end up pushing corners out in your bowl. So I flip
are
this.
they metal?
They're metal, yeah. And this is like a stiff metal. And this is my like that's same pressure. I can like almost fold this one in half. So I usually put my hand over. However you do this, this is just the way I taught myself with this hand, my left hand on the right side. But I just want to clean off this inside bit over here before I really start shaping it. Because once I start shaping it, it's going to be tough to get in there.
Where do you find that most people, I mean, what you're doing now, most of the time they're doing like, what, 11 or something like that?
Oh, like up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do it. I'm about like 3:15. I'm talking about like on if this was a clock where I hold my hand. Yeah, I know. I see some people do this, and that seems great to me. Like to have that sort of ability to look at that from a distance, and here I am like all hunched over. It probably stretches my wrist in a way that's keeping me from getting carpal tunnel. So then I'm going to bring this rib in, and this does have this hard corner on it, and I'm going to use that corner. I need this rib for that corner. So I'll place it into the wall about 1.5 inches from the top, and I'll start stretching that area down, out, and then into the bottom, and back up.
So now what does the corner do?
So that's where the corner is right there. See, watch this. I'm going to use that corner in here to make that change of direction. And trying to meet up at the bottom of that pot for over and over again. And then I can take this, I can lean that in just ever so slightly, just lay that down and forward. Take this down a little bit more. So this is always like a game of just trying to get this down as far as I can without having it fall, especially in front of you guys. On camera to be shown.
Maybe some people behind you can y'all see?
And then I usually touch this corner up down here a little bit. I went to Bizen, Japan, and saw some pots that were kind of like this. So they gave me the idea for this piece of 2005. Guilford College funded that trip. Yeah, it was. They funded a lot. They got a Freeman Foundation grant. If you guys listen to public radio, anytime there's anything about Asia, it's usually the Freeman Foundation is supplying the money for that funding to do that reporting. So they gave back in 04, 05, if you had an existing East Asian Studies program at your college or university, you could get a grant from the Freeman Foundation. And Guilford got, I don't know, like a $1 or $2 million grant, which seems like a lot, right? But then there was like universities that were getting like $8 and $10, $12 million grants. And then it ended up that it was, we're busy at school, and even though this money comes in, it's like doing a project takes time and energy, and So there's all this money to be spent in places they're looking to spend it on anything Asian related. So I built this Asian style wood kiln that some of you have hired. And had a potter come in who had studied in Korea, and I went to Japan with Guilford. So I got a lot out of that training. It's really a fantastic opportunity. So before I take this off the wheel, I'm going to mark for myself my two sides. I'll use those back pins again. And I'm going to mark, just give myself a little mark of these two pins are going to be, so that when I go and start cutting this, I'll have that plotted out. Just going to have to take it all. So this I have to really let set up to trim it, because I'm going to flip it over, and having this this angle in here, it's not very supportive for the whole bowl, and if I put some pressure on it, I can easily have it flop. So typically these guys, I'll put them in a damp closet. Do you guys have a damp closet? No? I've got this like plastic, this like wooden shelf, plastic lining, and a door that opens up that has plastic on it. And I'll put it in there, and it'll dry slowly over a few days, so that it'll be really evenly dried. It won't be like stiff at the rim and soft at the bottom. It'll be even throughout. And so I can flip it over, trim the bottom, and flip it back over and cut through the top with a knife before I use a sure form to kind of clean it up. Otherwise, in order to get the bottom stiff enough to trim, typically this like lip will be so stiff that you can't cut through it anymore. It's really difficult to work with. And that'll make that process really difficult to shape that and not have it crack on you somewhere. So when I trim this, it's going to get a little bit messy. Move some of this off. Yeah, I see you guys have those foam bats.
Pretty good. Most pieces. It seems to work better about the medium size ones instead of the real big ones.
Yeah.
It gets kind of wobbly.
How about, do you have the bats with the rubber coating on, like a little bit of rubber coating on them?
Rubber coating on it.
Yeah, there's a couple on the bottom right there.
Are those pretty good?
Yeah, they pretty much stay in place if the piece is heavy enough. Real thin, if it was lightweight, you might not want to stay on there.
Yeah. For trimming plates and things like that, I bet that's...
Lighter weight it is, more like this. Same thing also.
This is a homemade bat. It's one of my first students at Guilford made some bats and left some of them behind. And this was one of them. And he signed the bottom of it, so I get to see his name all the time. So you can see this line I drew across the bottom. You guys see that? That is, that's my low point when I cut the top, and I'll cut the foot at that point as well. And I started, it's always hard holding it up upside down. I'm trying to cut that foot and figure out where exactly the lowest point is. And so I cut this line, I made this line in there, started doing that from the bat, using the bat pins to make my mark up high, and using a bat pin to make a mark down on the wheel head, so that I could find that spot easily. At home, I use this tool called a Giffen grip. I don't know if you guys are allowed to speak of such things.
I don't know where it is. It's around here somewhere.
And there's certain things I like to trim on it, and certain things that I just do not like to trim on it. And like for a cup or something like that, I think it's a bad tool or mug. I'll have like a chuck that's just dry that I use in there, and I trim it on the chuck with using the Giffen grip. But for something like this, I like it because I can flip it over easily, quickly, and check the thickness. And then I need to have it spinning with the foot down and the rim up, and it works really well to grab for that. But mine won't fit this wheel head, so I didn't bring it. Where's this other tool?
I'm curious about people are make faces and how do you trim those because the piece itself is, round and you're trying to level it. Is there an easy way to level it?
I don't know. I would just make a chuck for something if it was tall and narrow. Pat, do you encourage people to trim and throw their scraps on the floor?
Actually, and it's okay if mine go on the floor because I can get work study.
That's right. I know. I'm particular about students cleaning up after themselves at Guilford, but then it's like sometimes I make pots, and then I'm just drawn in so many different directions, and like the day's gone, and I haven't gotten back to my pots, much less like gone back to clean my wheel. And sometimes I'll try to get a student to clean it up for me. I encourage them to throw at the wheel I threw at for my demos, so you can take care of it. So I'm guessing that this is about how much I need to trim off based on what the inside of my pot looked like and having thrown bowls for a while, but I'm not positive. I'm kind of nervous about it. So if I cut through, it's not on purpose.
I saw somebody do something one time where the pot was not quite leather, and they poked it with a needle tool and measured it.
The thickness, and then close the hole back up.
Close the hole back up, the bottom and the side, so they could know how thick it was.
That seems like it would be a good idea. With these pots, usually I can feel down the side and I can really tell where it needs clay out of it, but these with that turned lip up at the top, I can never feel. And this is a little on the soft side. I don't like to have any give when I'm trimming them down here, so I can push on them and cut them thin and not have to worry about flipping it over and finding that I've like pushed the clay down. But I think about this curve off of here and it turning towards that middle, towards that bottom. And then just trying to shrink this foot down.
Out of that.
I will, yeah. I'm just trying to get this. I'm going to flip it over though and check to see what it feels like. See, even I flip them over. I feel like sometimes the students would rather cut through the bottom and flip it over and check it. It still feels really heavy. That could be because I have a lot of clay in the bottom, but it's probably because it's still thick. It's just soft. It's funny, when I'm trimming these with the Giffen group, I kind of don't, I know that they're not going to be quite centered because of what I've done to the lip. And it doesn't bother me. I just get them in there and trim and try to get them as close as I can. I'll push them around a little bit. But it's like then when I set it up like this, I feel like it's got to be much closer than I would typically do it. So when you all make bowls, do you think about how you're going to glaze them? How you're going to like get that rim when you're like forming the bottoms? I always think about like how am I going to like handle this pot when I go to glaze it if I need to flip it over. And I like to be able to grab the foot ring with my hand, with one hand, turn it over. Just resetting those marks in there, make sure I don't lose them. That bat's really off center, isn't it? It's kind of tricking me, making me feel like the pot's off center. The bat, yeah, it's got some like polyurethane on it. So I'll trim a little bit of this inside of the foot off, and think about my foot the same way I think about my rims. In that, like a lot of stability and support here, but then coming up to this fine spot where it's going to touch. And a better mark. Mark my spot in here. So the last thing I'll do is kind of throw that edge there, soften it up. Oh, and then the last thing, cut that little line in the middle. Place for my signature. Well, it doesn't feel really light, but it doesn't feel too terribly heavy either, and it's still wet on the bottom, so unless I want to break it, it's going to be tough to tell. All right, and then I'm going to measure across the top and find the center point. Oh, is this one longer? Nope. Made it too big. Does anybody, is there a, well, it's long enough. That might be just enough. So I can measure from both sides. Yeah, that's about the middle. It doesn't want to stay. $14 and a little over a half. So I'll just mark this top part, give me an idea of where my highest point is and my lowest point. All right, and then I just cut the side. I come across here to my low mark and then back up. And when I go back up, I'm always err on the side of caution, because if I go too far, it's not good. And I give myself a little bit of leeway here. I'm going to use the Sureform to finish it, so. So I just kind of eyeball this and cut it down to that low point. When I cut it, I feel like I can cut the right side better than I can cut the left. And when I scrape it, I feel like I scrape the left side better than I scrape the right. It's a good thing I saved this for last, or one of the last things that's really messy. And I'll cut from the inside and from the outer edge a little bit, both.
How do you finish up that edge? Wouldn't it be a sharp edge?
It will be, yeah. That's where the Giffen grip comes in handy. I'm gonna attach it back to the wheel and spin it around and clean that edge up with the rib. So I'll try to get any flat spots out. And then I've started cutting across this top bit too, because I felt like for a little while you could see the high point.
And you don't like worry get worry about one side being higher than the other side, or
No, I just barely go over that edge. So I'm not really taking very much clay off. Oh, but you mean like this side being higher than this side? I do worry about it, and I do try to get them about even, but I see what you mean. If you hadn't mentioned that, I might not have seen. So it is.
no, it's something I always think about doing.
When I mark them, I try to be consistent. When I'm marking them and it's wet on the wheel, I try to be consistent about how high I mark them, so that when I cut them, I'm consistent about how low I cut them.
If you use the tempo, would that make it easier?
Oh, like just have a little thing that goes from the. Oh, that I could trace this outer edge with. That might be a good idea. I don't. I feel like they've worked okay without it, so I haven't gone that route. But if I was having trouble, or if I wanted to do something different, like I've thought about what happens if I didn't cut them evenly. Like this wave around it was not symmetrical from side to side. Well, it's a possibility of something I could do on purpose. Did I really flip that over and put it right in this dead center? Almost, didn't I?
What was your inspiration for this? Carving flowers like that?
I saw a piece in Japan that it was lower and the walls were higher on the sides and it had 4 scoops out of it, and they were different. I can't really remember. I have a picture of it someplace, but and then it had these like little towers at the corners, and that was where I saw that, and I thought, that's like cutting the lip like that. And I'd cut my lips before, but never on something like this. All right, so this is how I finished the lip. Got this fancy tool. I'm thinking this lip might be a little thicker than my credit card tool here. Yeah. I'm going to try a different one. I've got this other wider one. Got this one, and this is the one I usually use to finish the bottoms of those long trays after I've cut them. But I can finish them up with this and make them look as though they're thrown.
Is that a circular sort of cutout that you did?
It is, yeah. I just needed one a little bit bigger than this. I'll just rest it on there and go around. And that'll get me pretty close. Actually, usually my wall's a little bit thinner, and I just finish it up with this. But this one's, well, I dug the edge in. This one's like slightly wider. So I'm gonna have to, and I usually do this anyways. I usually go around it with a sponge last. And this is where if you're using like a stoneware clay with grog in it, this would not be a good way to finish the lip unless you wanted it to be really rough.
Charlie, have you tried those new Cheryl sponges that are real smooth, like a cosmetic sponge?
I haven't seen it. Are they blue?
No, it's not the blue one. He's got one that's white, same shape as the blue one.
Oh,
And it's really smooth like a cosmetic sponge, and it's great for smoothing stuff.
I've used a cosmetic sponge. My wife's old cosmetic sponge do that. But I've never used one on something like this. So that's it. Like those little, they're like triangular, like wedge shape. It's like a little wedge, and I'll get like a tool behind it and use it to get into small spots. And so it's like a really dense foam rubber. Now, because I've got all these shavings inside, you guys can imagine this, like getting those out and not marking up your bowl would be tough. So I don't even try to get them out now. I let them dry in there, and then I'll dump them out. And because my lip is wet now, if I try to dump them out right now, they'll stick all to my lip.